Welcome to ACC Nation, featuring sports news and special guest interviews. Here's Will Ojanen and Jim Quist.
Jenna Becerra and Amanda Lorenz from D1Softball podcast are our special guests. Thank you both for joining us.
Yeah, we're super excited. Yeah.
Hey, having a key pitcher and a great rotation can make all the difference in a team's success. How many teams in the NCAA Power 10 have that combo, the kind that takes them, let's say, to the WCWS? I'll start with Jenna on that one.
In the Power 10, well, actually, I think a lot, to be honest, because in today's game, you really can't just have one pitcher. It is very much a by committee approach, and it has been for the last several years, especially as more and more information is available to hitters, like on pitchers, where pitches are located, what their tendencies are, all of that stuff. It's different than just the little DVDs that I used to get for film, if that, right, for some pitchers when I played. So I think because of that, it's all but a necessity for staffs to have not just one, but two. But obviously it makes all the difference. Like even just looking at Oklahoma last year, they had Jordy Ball, but they also had Nicole May. They had an entire staff, really. So it's not like they just got there with one pitcher and they just three-peated with one pitcher. They've had a bunch of great pitchers throughout the bullpen over these last several years come in and out and graduate from the program.
Your thoughts, Amanda?
It's totally agree. I think Jenna touched on the information piece, and our hitters just keep getting better and better because we have access to so much information about what these pitchers are doing. And so that's why the pitching by committee is becoming way more popular and utilized, because you have to keep these hitters off balance.
Some of the people that I have sort of looked at here, LSU's Sydney Berzon, absolutely killing it on the mound. Some of the thoughts, and I'll start with Amanda on this one, and some of your thoughts on Sydney, and we'll get into some of the other pitchers, because as you both point out here, it's not just one, it's an entire rotation. It's an entire team's worth of pitching that's making the difference.
Yeah, I think that Coach Beth Dorina does an amazing job of teaching her pitchers to really have multiple speeds, and you see that in Sydney. And she obviously competes just really well, and she's having a great season. But I think it really has to do with the amount of speeds that she can throw. When you're keeping hitters off balance the whole time, it's really hard to pick one speed when you're throwing multiple speeds for strikes. It's hard to be successful, right? It's hard to feel comfortable in the box. So she does a really good job of keeping hitters off balance and using all of her tools in her toolbox.
Jenna?
It's so important what Amanda's talking about, changing speeds. I would also add in changing planes, like being able to change the eye level for hitters. So Kelly Lynch, who's also on the staff, for example, who transferred from Washington to LSU, that's a great compliment there as well, right? Because she has a nice screwball, a nice rise ball, and that complements not only her other pitchers in the staff, but also like she can change levels to keep hitters off balance. Because can you imagine trying to throw to a hitter in the making, like a pre-Amanda Lorenz, as we know her right now, and not be able to throw an off speed or a rise ball or change planes, right? Like it's almost impossible at this point. So I think, yes, those change planes, change speeds changes the game.
All right, let's get into this NCAA Power 10 here for just a moment and talk a little bit about what makes each one of these teams so special, and what they're bringing here, and what probably is going to take them to the WCWS. And we'll start out with the most obvious, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think that the thing that's so special about them is their lineup, in my opinion. Just the amount of depth that they have hitting wise is pretty unbelievable. Anybody can do damage at any time. So I'd say just their depth is really impressive, that they're able to count on many people, some that aren't even in the starting lineup, that can have a game tying, game winning hit at any moment, that they can trust that many people on their team is just really impressive. So go back to that. I just think they just are lethal. Not only 1 through 9, but probably throughout their entire roster.
I completely second that. I mean, you look at their starting lineup and there are multiple All-Americans. Essentially, almost the entire starting lineup are either returning All-Americans, preseason All-Americans this year, all the accolades. But I think it's to Amanda's point, they have so many good players that they can reach to at any time. We used to call it when I was in college, we would say we had an All-American bench. And that had to do with their talent and their ability, like we're talking about, and also how engaged they are in the game, picking pitches, like trying to figure out, oh, I'm seeing this from this pitcher, or what did you see? Did that runner look like they were leaving early? Let's let our defense know. Just all those little things. I think they do the little things really, really well, and that makes the difference.
As we talked about prior to actually getting on air here, my printer decided it would work about 20 minutes after the fact. It's a distraction to me, not to anybody else. Hey, one of the things that I know that when you work with somebody, you get into a rhythm with each other. And I'm along for the ride here. So I'm trying to pick up on your rhythm of how you work back and forth. I'm beginning to get a little bit of a feel for that. So we'll work through that and we'll see how it all plays out. So, you take the ball and run with it if I start dropping it one place or the other. Okay. So I trust both of you will be more than anxious to take care of that and take care of things. So we talked a little bit about LSU. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Texas and, what's special here?
I think that they are able to do a lot of things really well. They can pitch well, they play really good defense, and they're hitting well as well. So when you have all three of those working together, that's usually a recipe for success. I really love their strength of schedule this year. I feel like they've really tried to challenge their really talented roster early on. Love an early midweek at LSU, throwing them into the fire, not even knowing if LSU was going to be their undefeated selves coming in. Obviously that was on the schedule before then, but LSU is a very hostile place to play. Like you don't want to play in front of those fans and be in front of that crowd. And so they're just really throwing them into the SEC atmosphere, getting ready for next year. And so that's the thing that I love. It feels like this group is happy to embrace a challenge and get better, even if it doesn't go their way.
I think that's pretty consistent for the most part across the top 10 too, just because it has to be, right? Like there's a reason coaches make these schedules the way that they do. Sometimes they don't always anticipate how hard it's going to be. Like Amanda said, who knew, like no one guessed necessarily that anyone would still be undefeated at that point when LSU was. But I think it's just for Texas, that is the point. It's really like getting battle tested. They know that they're obviously in the Big 12 currently this year still with OU, the three-peat. They're a team that's going for the four-peat, right? There's also that rivalry layer to throw in there as well between the two. But I just think that they want to make sure they're facing the best teams. And even some of the teams, like they don't have very many losses, but they split with Stanford. They lost to Stanford, but they also beat Stanford once, so they are getting like kind of both sides of the coin there. And that's what you need really later on when it gets really, really hard.
I'm going to skip over Duke here because I want to put a little more emphasis on ACC as we get further into this. So let's go to our next team, which would be Stanford. So I think we could probably can say that we'll start with Jenna on that
one. Good idea.
Yeah, appreciate that. I wonder why you said that now. Yeah, it's really fun, obviously, as an alum to see the rise of the program in recent years, particularly because the head coach, Jessica Allister, was an assistant coach when I played, and she recruited myself, most of my class, the classes around me. And so I kind of had a firsthand look at how she recruits and how she just approaches things in the game. And she knows how to build up a program. It's not the first time. She did it at Minnesota before she came back to Stanford. And then all of a sudden you go from when she first got here was a sub 500 team to now everyone's talking about Nigel Kennedy being the best pitcher in the country. And they went to the World Series last year and all of those things. But what I think she does so well is not worry about the results. She is all about the process. And that's in every form, in the bullpen with the pitchers and catchers, the infielders, outfielders, hitting, everything. Like if I try to ask her like, oh, what do you think about facing this team in a couple of weeks? She's like, no, we're playing on Wednesday against so-and-so. That's all we're thinking about right now. Like she just does not get ahead of herself. And then it ends up to her actually getting better results in the end with her team. But they have the pitching. They've had that the past couple of years. And then on top of that, I think their bats are starting to like get a little going a little bit more too. They had a lot of power this past weekend against Cal, and they swept their rival at their rival's house, which is always just kind of a mental, emotional boost in that sense. And so to play clean defense too, like they have a young infield, they have people in new positions who are also underclassmen this season, but the way she said it, Coach Alistair, is, young's not bad. Young, it's an opportunity. It's just different, right? So like, how do we manage that? And I just think that it starts with her and it trickles down really nicely.
Isn't it funny at what point you start looking back and going, young is never mind. This is a good transition for me to take the train off the tracks, which I often do on this show. Since we're talking about Stanford and we're going to talk about Amanda's background as well, I want to find out a little bit more about your collegiate careers and what you're doing now. So we'll start with Jenna, since it was a nice transition from Stanford.
Yes. Well, I mean, now I'm going to age myself, but that's okay. Yes, I played at Stanford. I graduated in 2012. And I had a great experience. I actually played under, head coach John Rittman, who's now at Clemson, who Amanda knows. She lives there. Like there are a lot of cool connections in that way too. And it's great to see what he's doing. And I'm sure we'll get more into that as well. And ever since then, I did work in tech for a while because that's what you do here in Silicon Valley. I'm based in the Bay Area still. But just couldn't shake the interest in sports, and always had like an interest in, I did my undergrad in communication and my grad school studies were in media studies. And I'm one of those people who actually is working in the area that they studied, which I think is more like not the norm, actually. I think a lot of people explore different things. But so, yeah, I work with Pac-12 Networks as an announcer for play-by-play in color. I work for Stanford Athletics with various sports, not just softball and baseball, but other sports as well. And Amanda and I obviously work together with D1Softball, which has been really fun so far this season. And I also have a separate podcast called Believe in Softball that I've had for a few years. And I've gotten to chat with a lot of actually the coaches and players and some of the teams that we're talking about. And it's always fun to get their perspectives.
All right, Jenna, let's throw softball out. What sport are you covering or have you covered that you would say you enjoy the most?
I can actually answer that very quickly. Volleyball. Okay. Women's volleyball has been so fun. And I think it reminds me of softball in the sense of that it's very quick moving, it's a very quick game. But I just think that, when you look at each match, like the strategy in which you see the women set things up and have to think so quickly, and the just like in system versus out of system and all the new things that I'm learning are so impressive. And it does help that, I did start by covering Stanford women's volleyball, and they've been like a top 5 team very consistently over the last several years and for a long time. So, when you see like the highest quality of a sport as well, that makes it a little sweeter, but it is so fun to call those matches.
Very neat. Glad you have an opportunity to do that, because you're right. A lot of people, their degrees typically don't transfer over into what they actually do in life, or at least long term. So my next move, Amanda, is, I don't even know if I can get my hands out here for
I love it. Right over left.
At the angle, the proper angle, because of the way the camera's set up here. But that should give everybody a little bit of taste as to where we're going to start with you.
Yeah. So my name is Amanda Lorenz. I'm from Southern California, went to the University of Florida, and just had the best time of my life in Gainesville. I loved Gainesville so much that I stayed on staff for 3 more years after I was done playing. After I was done playing collegiately, but still playing professionally. So I play for Athletes Unlimited, play for Team USA. I'm entering my 6th year of professional softball, which is wild. So officially have played, now going into my 2 more years longer than my collegiate career, which is just crazy, but insanely thankful that I still get to play the game, and then doing some things with D1Softball and hosting the podcast with Jenna, which has been so fun to talk about the game that I obviously love so much and has given me so much. So really cool just to talk about our game and keep growing it.
A lot of fun and growing it is, definitely. Hey, since I've got you off on a side rail here for just a few moments, I'll ask both of you this, because I always ask people who come on the show this question. What your favorite food is. One, I'll give you a few seconds to think about this. Maybe it won't take that long, but here's the one you may want to think about. What's your favorite place to eat? Because both of you have spent time on the road, both with the schools and, and otherwise. So there's sometimes it's like you got to hit someplace fast and hope you get something good to eat. Or if you have time to sit down and really enjoy a good meal, either in your hometown or wherever you're living, and or on the road. So let's hear about your favorite foods, and I'm gonna throw it to Jenna now and see what she has to say.
Oh, the pressure. No. For me, my favorite food, it has always been, probably will always be, it's chocolate. Like, I am a chocoholic forever. And I even, like, with desserts, if it doesn't have chocolate, I have a sweet tooth, but I'm like, it's not, I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know if I need a dessert if it doesn't have chocolate in it. I just love it that much.
Right,
now I'm very in,
is
yeah.
it milk chocolate or dark chocolate?
Good question. That's what I was about to specify. I'm very into dark chocolate now.
Good for you. Good for
Yes. Yeah. And I'm like, I tell myself that it has more health benefits too and everything as well. So, I make it work that way.
There you go. That's what I like to hear. What's your favorite place to eat when you're either on the road or at home?
So the first thing that popped into my head when you mentioned this is Del Taco. And it's because I'm from Southern California, and that's where most of the locations are. There's a few spread out as well, but most of them are there. But my parents and, their sides of the both sides of the family are from Barstow, which is, like, if anyone's driven from LA to Vegas, you've driven through Barstow. It's just in the middle of the desert, but it had the first Del Taco. And so it has the best Del Taco. The further away you get from it, the more standard and kind of nothing special it is. But in Barstow, that Del Taco is the number one. So that's got to be my answer.
Del Taco, I'll tell you. All right, Amanda. Pressure now is switched. It's on you.
And the thing about me is I'm never feeling pressure when it comes to food. I had an answer ready to go right when you said it. Being from Southern California, I love Mexican food. So, like, some carne asada tacos, love that. On the road, if it's quick and you need something reliable, I like a Chipotle or a Cava. Then they're reliable and yummy and healthy for the most part. And if I have time to sit down, I love Cheesecake Factory. Cheesecake Factory is so elite. And I'm a ranch connoisseur. So I don't know if everyone knows that about me, but I know the best of the best ranch, and I know the worst of the worst ranch. And the best of the best ranch is at Cheesecake Factory.
Oof. Really? This is the intel we need.
Yeah.
I like that.
Jenna might know this as well. Topper's Pizza in our area. They also have an elite ranch.
That is a great call out. So Amanda and I are both from the same area-ish, like in Ventura County. We're both from the 805. So we both are obviously on the same page with Toppers.
Okay, very good. And now Toppers I've never heard of. So I'll have to check that out.
I think it's a SoCal thing too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, like kind of specific.
Del Taco, I know that. So no problem. Okay, enough of the distractions. Okay, interesting answers. Very good. I like that. Let's take a look here at some of the other teams in this top 10. Let's take a look now at Georgia. And they had a big run over Alabama, which was impressive, and also kind of pumped them up just a bit in that 10. And so what are your thoughts on Georgia?
I'm gonna let you go, Amanda, because I know you. Yeah.
You know how I feel.
Yeah.
I am super passionate about I think the Georgia Bulldogs look really good this year, and that's coming from a Gator too. But I am a huge fan of Tony Baldwin. I think that he does such a great job with his team, and they love the way that he leads as well. He has a great relationship with his kids. They can hit the ball really well. They're pitching really well, which I feel like hasn't happened for a number of years, where they can really rely on their pitchers to keep the runs down. And they're playing elite defense too, which we've always known Georgia as a big hitting team, that they've always been able to hit home runs and put big scores up on the board, but they've been one to kind of let that go on defense and let a lot of runs score against them as well. And so I think that they have the perfect piece of the puzzle this year that they haven't had in a really long time, and it's been really fun to watch them be all on the same page. They have new members of their staff, and just feels like Coach Baldwin has done such a really, really good job, and it's showing with the way that his kids are playing.
Okay. Any additional thoughts?
The only thing I would add is that I agree, A, but B, we got to see them play in person too in Clearwater. Amanda and I both did. And it was so fun to just see their energy. I feel like there's a certain energy about them. I think she's totally right. A lot of it has to do with the leadership of Tony Baldwin. We had a chance to chat with him too while we were there. And he, in his answers, wasn't just talking about, X's and O's and things. He was talking about the joy of the game and them having each other's backs and sort of those key intangible things that really make a difference. And I think we see it. And I know Amanda won't bring this up, so I will. Lindy Ray Davis and Amanda got to chat. Amanda got to interview her for D1Softball. And it was the cutest thing ever because Lindy Ray was so excited to meet Amanda. She was like, oh my gosh, I loved watching you play. And she was so excited. And then they got to actually talk about the game together. And for me to just be witnessing that as it was being recorded, I'm like, this is really what it's all about. That was really, really cool.
Just because you had mentioned about well, both of what you do, never forget this. Your point being made here is that you make an impression on people who are younger than you all the time. People look up to you, and it always amazes me when I see that sort of thing. I coached basketball for years and years and years, and it still will have some of the players come up to me. Just like a 30+ year difference between us, and say hi and go out of their way to, that means a lot. So I will tell you that both of you are making that sort of impression. So when that happens, that's a cool thing. It means you're doing something right. So keep that with you. That's pretty cool. I like that. Hey, Tennessee, Jenna, let's talk about Tennessee and what's going on there.
This is another team that we got to see play in person. I also got to see them at Mary Nutter as well. And I think that they made it to the Women's College World Series last year. They have the likes of Kiki Malloy, who I think is on a lot of people's short lists for National Player of the Year. She became the all-time leading home run hitter at Tennessee that weekend at Mary Nutter. And then at the same time, you had Carlin Pickens throw a perfect game. And I think there were 3 perfect games around the SEC that weekend too. So it was really cool to see a lot of that live. And I think they have that. I think there are certain things that maybe they want to be a little bit more consistent with just because their standards are so high at this point. But I think they have the tools. Like they have the offensive tools. They have the pitchers. It's just bringing it all together. It sounds simple, but it's not easy to have pitching be on point, defense be on point, and hitting be on point and timely all at the same time consistently every game. Like there's a lot that goes into each one. So I think, they've had some wonderful moments. There have been some other moments where maybe they know they can do better. I think if they bring it all together, though, they have a great package that they're bringing to the table.
So, Amanda, since Jenna got to pump up Stanford, let's pump up Florida here.
Let's go.
Tell us a little bit about the Gators.
Yeah, I'm really excited about a lot of their young ones. I think that, there was a huge question mark in the circle for them this year, returning 0 pitchers. So they are a staff full of newcomers and all freshmen except one grad transfer. So really, they're really young, but really hungry, and it's been really fun to watch them not play like freshmen. You have Keegan Rothrock and Ava Brown, who have totally taken the reins and being those ones that you can look to in the circle and have gotten the majority of the innings, and they have absolutely shown up and put on their big girl pants and have been ready to roll. It was really, really cool to see them go into Tuscaloosa, which is a really hard place to play, and play like veterans, and ready to compete. And then also they have who is probably the most athletic, strongest softball player in the country in Skylar Wallace, who can just do some freak things up at the plate and plays a really good shortstop as well. So I think that anytime you have a player like that who can hit the ball as far as she can and then also steal all the bases right in your face, is a pretty incredible player to have on your team. And so yeah, I think that they're hitting the ball really well, and excited for them to keep getting the challenge of the SEC and see how far they can take it. But a lot of opportunity with this young group for sure.
I'm going to throw this one. This is a little bit of a curveball and this is really for both of you, even though I'm going to be talking a little bit about Stanford here. But Stanford got a nice sweep of Cal, which was, something that hasn't happened for a while. But one of the things that's coming up here is Stanford and Cal are both going to the ACC. And with all this realignment that's going on, I always like to get everybody's opinion of realignment in general. It doesn't necessarily have to be this particular aspect of it, but just realignment and how you think it's impacting college sports as you see it.
It's complicated. It's very complicated, and it's definitely having a big impact on college sports. I think, we're used to seeing conferences be essentially drawn out based on regions and not maybe exact. We've had other schools move different conferences. Missouri went from the Big Ten to the SEC, right? Like Texas A&M went from the Big 12 to the SEC. We've seen things like that happen before, but maybe not on this scale to this broad of a scope. I think for me, understanding that, the schools have to keep in mind, like from a revenue standpoint and just their ability to operate, what's going to work for them. And a lot of that is tied to TV. So that's where it came from. A lot of decisions were made based on football, maybe some men's basketball as well. So I've heard some folks, for example, wonder like, well, could it have been like a football only move for a lot of these changes? And then maybe other sports aren't as affected, particularly for the ones who are traveling really far or will be moving forward, like a Stanford or a Cal to the ACC. I think a lot of these schools are glad to still be in Power 5 top talent, top level competition from an athletic standpoint. The concerns I have are just for the student athletes mainly. I just think that the schools will definitely, and they hopefully are making those plans, but just in general, having the academic support, mental health support, all of those things, because it is hard to be a student athlete already. And then you throw NIL stuff in there, and that added a whole nother layer. And then now it's realignment. So you're traveling more and missing more school and those sorts of things. So I think just assuring that those resources are there is like one of the most important things that institutions can do.
Keep talking that way and let everybody know that, because I think that's important, because that opinion that means a lot, and especially when it's coming from former athletes who see it clearly, because you've experienced it. Amanda, your thoughts on realignment?
Yeah, I think that when I think about who it affects the most and the greatest, I really think about baseball, softball, probably the most selfishly. But I think if I'm choosing to play at UCLA, to play in front of my family and play in the sunshine, that's for a reason. I didn't plan to go play at Rutgers and play in the cold. I think that's a different kind of conversation, right? I think it affects recruiting greatly, because there's many kids that were trying to stay in playing in the Pac-12 to play locally and where their families could go see all of their games, and they're able to stay on that side of the country and mostly play in warmer weather. And then now you're traveling really far every other weekend, and that's a lot on your body, especially when these are probably the teams in your athletic department that are not going to be flying private across the country. So like having to work with certain times and all the things like the recovery piece and academically, it's going to be extremely hard for these athletes to get enough sleep and make sure that they're recovering and get their school taken care of, make sure that they're eating the correct way. Like their bodies are going to break down pretty fast. And it's going to be really interesting to see what these athletic departments and conferences can do to support these athletes to say, hey, we know it's not ideal, but how can we make this the best situation possible so that they really don't get a lot of the back burner of things, because it's going to be really tough on them, especially because we're not football. We're not going away for just 2 nights and flying private right away back home. Like we're there for 4 nights, sometimes 3 nights. Yeah. And then when you're adding in going across the country and the time zone, the time change, it's going to be a really hard thing. And think about Stanford and Cal. They're going to be East Coast, then back to West Coast, East Coast, then back to West Coast, assuming that it's going to be a home and away kind of situation, how it normally is for these conferences. So it's going to be very interesting. And I just hope that the athletes are being thought of.
Yeah.
Hope so. I echo just what both of you said. It's disturbing, and so I hope that it is being thought out. We'll find out, I guess. Let's jump into the ACC teams that are in the top 25. Take a look at Duke at number 6. Jayla Wright has an unbelievable ERA and is really helping to deliver for the Blue Devils. Let's talk a little bit about what Duke is doing and where they are at this point of the season.
I just can't overstate how impressive it is, how for Duke and Clemson, how quickly they both became so good on a national scale after barely creating the programs. Like I think Duke, it's been maybe 6 years tops, and Clemson, it's been maybe 4. So just all the credit in the world to head coach Marissa Young for that, first and foremost. But I think she talked a lot about how when I had chatted with her on the D1Softball podcast, she really talked about wanting to come in and just like come out of the gates hot. Like she knew that it would take time to build up a program, and it does take time, but she really wanted to start competing and just have that mentality right away. And I think that we see that to this day, like having been built on what some of these other players have put there first, like a Peyton St. George, for example, in the circle, really laid down the foundation. She was player 1 for team 1 for Duke, right? And then now you fast forward and that paves the way for a Jayla Wright to do what she's doing. And I think Marissa Young, having been the beast that she was as a player too, like having pitched at Michigan and understanding what it takes to play at the highest level in this collegiate world as well, and balancing all the things like schoolwork and other things as well, makes a huge difference. And so for them, I think it's similar. You know, they were a top 8 seed. They hosted super regionals last year. That's a big deal. Clemson went to super regionals and went up against Oklahoma and almost beat them. Like they were right there with them. And I think it's just a matter of time for a team like Duke to get over that hump to make it to the Women's College World Series.
So let's just make that transition right into Clemson, Amanda.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, having the reigning National Player of the Year still in the circle for you means you're probably tuned up to do some really cool things this season. So returning Val Cagle is obviously huge, not only for what she can do in the circle, but how she competes on the opposite side of the ball as well. She likes when the game is in her hands and she's able to impact the game on both sides of the ball at all times. So that's been awesome to watch. And then got some key transfers in Alex Brown and Lindsay Garcia. Alex Brown had a huge weekend against North Carolina, her former school this weekend, which was pretty cool. And obviously for those transfers means just a little bit more doing it against your former team. But yeah, they've got some awesome tools and really elite athletes, and returned a lot of the same team from last year. And it's crazy the standard that has been created so quickly for both Clemson and Duke, that they not only are just they weren't talking about making postseason early on as a program. They're talking about going to the Women's College World Series. They're talking about going to Oklahoma City, and it's a very attainable goal for them, which is just so cool to see. Obviously, Clemson and Duke did a tremendous job in hiring the leaders that they chose for these programs, right? Because they're bringing in the right kids with the right buy-in, and they're winning a lot of games and doing it the right way. So really cool to see just them do things the right way and be competitive from the start.
You're right about the institutions themselves too, Amanda. I so agree. Meaning like they hired the right people. The fan base of Clemson, you've experienced it in person how many times, right? It's like amazing. Duke too, just with their reputation as an athletic department and academic institution, like that helped them recruit too, right? So like they just knew what they were doing. They had all the stars aligned.
Let's get into Virginia Tech. They just lost an important game, which they slipped out of the Power 10. They're at 14 in the top 25 poll for D1Softball this week. Some mixed messages there. What do you think?
Virginia Tech's always interesting, I think, because when we look at the ACC, we haven't even gotten to Florida State yet, right? But like the standard that Florida State set, what Duke and Clemson have done to rise to be right there with them. But then Virginia Tech is always right there too. They're always right there. So even I don't even remember necessarily. I don't know if Virginia Tech was in my first top 25 poll of the season, my personal ballot. And then they've been sort of rising as the season has gone on because of what they've been able to do. And I think it's one of those things where you can be overlooked in the rankings and things like that. But when I talk to coaches and players, like everyone only really cares about the rankings, like at the end of the day, at the end of the season. But at the same time, you can use those types of things for like some locker room motivation as well, just to kind of play with a chip on your shoulder. And I think sometimes Virginia Tech does that, and they steal games from some of these top teams in the ACC, right? So I think they are going to continue to do that. I think they might, float up and down a little bit in the rankings. It is what it is, but like I think they're going to continue to steal some games and surprise people a little bit.
I left Florida State for the very end,
Yeah.
specifically for Amanda. So
we'll get there.
There's such an undying love for Florida State there in Gainesville. Talk to us a little bit about the Seminoles.
Yeah, so I'm not, I should be, but I'm not a Florida State hater, truly. I think that I have a lot of friends that are Seminoles and the way that they love their program and Coach Alameda, I love that. I love that when other athletes can really love their school, there's something to be respected there, right? And I truly think that they play the game the right way. So I'm not a hater when it comes down to it. Obviously, I want to beat them every time, but yeah, I think that one thing about Florida State is the thing that I have loved about their program for a number of years is it never feels like they always put together the team that they want. And it all comes together in the end. So I feel like we always have a few question marks about Florida State, like, and just really not understanding. And Coach Alameda knows. And it seems like when it's time to win, her team is the most together of any team in the country. And it doesn't matter if they're the most talented, they just know and have this belief that they're going to get it done. I think they're incredibly mentally tough. And it's just never a time where they're freaking out based on results, which I think is really fun to watch, right? In a sense of freeing throughout the whole team. But I don't think it's time to freak out about the Seminoles. They always come when it's close, when it's in the end of the season, they're always there competing. And in the beginning, we can have a lot of question marks about who's playing here and what are they going to do without Catherine Sandercock, and they always figure it out. So I think that they have a lot of tools that they just haven't blossomed, and I think that's what they always do at the right time. Is they all bloom at the same time and at the end of the season. So I think that the rest is still unwritten for them. I'm sure that they're about to boom right as we get to the end of the season.
Well, Amanda, if no one has told you this before, you have a career as a politician in front of you. So you handled that so well. I set you up on purpose with that one, and you just hit it out of the park. So very good.
Thank you very much.
Now, one last question here. I keep looking at the top 25, and I want to go a little deeper than the top 25. And I think this is going to be really on both of you to decide, because often every season there's a team that just seems to have angel wings. And, they're the type of team that, oh boy, they're just surprising everybody, or they're winning a lot more than they should for no apparent reason, or they end up surprising everyone and going to the WCWS. So, are there teams that fit that description for either one of you so far at this point in the season?
Yeah, for right now, I would say that's LSU for me. I did not expect for them to start the season 24-0, and all of a sudden, just everything is working correctly for them. I can't predict that for the end of the season for anybody. I feel like it just always, it happens and it's so unpredictable, but the people in those programs truly believe it. But if I'm looking at right now, I would say that LSU was definitely that team for me that I was like, whoa, okay. And then until the Texas win, I was like, wow, like they are really, and the sweep of Kentucky at Kentucky was really impressive. So that paired together in the same week, and I know they're playing currently and lost to Ole Miss last night, but still they're doing a really good job of scoring a lot of runs and having a great pitching staff, keeping the runs low. So they're my ones with angel wings right now.
Jenna?
Yeah, I think if I'm looking kind of towards some of the mid majors too, a couple that pop out. One is Boston. They've just been on an absolute roll, so they've made it into the top 25 for D1Softball in more than 1 week. Just across the polls, there's a team that we're all looking at, and then it's interesting. I would say Louisiana is an interesting program to watch, just because they started like under 500. I think when we interviewed, Amanda and I got to chat with Jerry Glasgow, and when we talked to him, they were under 500 in their record, and they've had so many consecutive seasons of having at least 40 wins. So it's just a new place to be for them as a program. But since then, they have been chipping away, and now they're 18-12 as of right this second, and they beat the number 1 team in the country, right? And last year that was Baylor. This year it was Louisiana. And I just think you can never fully count them out. I feel like they always come into the postseason and make a push too. Even if it's like getting to super regionals or whatever it looks like, I feel like they're always fun to watch.
They got those angel wings going on. Where can people follow both of you on social media?
You can follow me on Instagram at Amanda Lorenz, and then on Twitter at Amanda Lorenz 18.
So funny enough, I realized we just did the same thing, Amanda. Okay, on Instagram, you can follow me at Jenna Becerra, but on Twitter, you can follow me at Jenna Becerra01. So our jersey numbers apparently are required for Twitter.
I love it.
I gotcha. Great. And I hope people do that. And thank you so much to Jenna Becerra and Amanda Lorenz from D1Softball. The podcast, make sure that you go to the website, check out the podcast, make sure you subscribe, like, listen, give them a 5-star rating. It's a lot of fun to listen to. It's a lot of fun to watch. You can watch them on YouTube as well. A lot of great information that's going on there. Jenna, Amanda, thank you so much for joining us, talking softball. I've learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to ACC Nation. Be sure to listen, like and subscribe to our podcast, radio, and YouTube channels by visiting accnation.net. Follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, Mastodon, Threads, Blue Sky and Reddit at ACC Nation.
ACC Nation.